sure that anyone here who's had experiences, whether it's malevolent or positive in your mind, it's still a transformative moment, and it's led you to being here, right? Interested in talking with all these different people. So I've had some really interesting connections. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a trained, investigative reporter, but I became inundated with people in the intelligence community. I interviewed a lot of them. I've spoken with a lot of these people, privately and on record, and kind of feels like nobody knows what's going on. Doesn't matter how important you are, doesn't matter what level of accolades you have, it's just ideas. It's all ideas. And I'm in the market of ideas when it comes to this subject, not definitives. I don't think we have definitives. There may be some other people that challenge that and say, absolutely no, I know what's going on. But I don't. And I wouldn't feel comfortable telling you that I do. I literally, my kind of position here is I just want to try and be a conduit for information and to do my best to curate that in a way that is sensible in a very nonsensible subject. Something that's laughed at so much, it took a while for my family to get around to the idea that I actually had these experiences with these orbs, but I'm quite blessed actually with an understanding family, and they're all very proud of me being here today, so, I'm lucky in that sense. But I know that people in this room probably don't have that. A lot of people come seeking in the UFO community because people are not ready to hear this, The people in your lives are not necessarily ready. And so, what do you do then? You have to go off and search and find people. That's what happened to me. I found all of you. Found out that there's a whole world of people that have had experiences. And, I really think that if you take it all away, if you stripped out, take away the crash retrieval programs and the government in Roswell and all of that, and go back into like the deeper history. Our ancestors, I think they had a science of consciousness that was way more sophisticated than what we've got. In fact, we're only just getting to a point now, it seems, in certain elements, where we're developing technologies that are actually present in our most ancient past. This is something else that's really fascinated me. Is anyone here, hands up if you've heard of psychoacoustics or psychoacoustic architecture? Couple of you. Psychoacoustics is a demonstrable thing. You can literally check out the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of binaural tones, things like this that change your brainwave from beta to theta to gamma, etc. So the Monroe Institute, in conjunction with the CIA and a few others, Stanford, they've demonstrated that ultrasound, infrasound, different harmonic keys can actually alter your conscious perception. We know this, it's science. What's fascinating is that the ancients were doing this on a much larger scale. And I do think this leads into the UFO concept, and it leads into the consciousness conversation. Because I think what they were actually accessing were higher states of coherence that were allowing them to perceive elements of reality that perhaps these UFOs do represent to a certain extent, higher dimensional frameworks. And a good example is the Hypogeum in Malta. Hypo, G-E-U-M. And this is a fascinating site. There are sites all over the world like this, but this is like a really key one. And it's an acoustic, subterranean sound temple that resonates at 110 hertz. And this is the bandwidth that actually shifts us into these theta states, these higher states of consciousness. Now, these are everywhere, all over the world, pre-BC, ancient places. And they were deliberately engineered with specific geometry, specific materials, for a specific purpose, to raise the state of consciousness. So again, this is something that we have dramatically lost, right, in our more materially driven world. Our ancients knew this stuff. I think, to invoke Terence McKenna, for anyone who's heard of the stoned ape theory, I think that tracks as at least one element of explaining how we were able to get these incredible engineering concepts at a time when we shouldn't have been able to understand psychoacoustic architectural practices. So just to quickly give you an idea of what I'm thinking here, and this is kind of in line with Terence McKenna, and if you haven't heard of Terence McKenna, please listen to him. He's fantastic, and I wish he was alive today. I've interviewed his brother, Dennis, a couple of times, but Terence was a truly gifted orator and speaker, and I feel like the times we're living in now, he would be of a real benefit to us. But his idea involved psilocybin cubensis, also known as magic mushrooms, which we've now demonstrated have a capacity for what's called neural avalanching or neural genesis, where the neurons light up, the brain starts communicating with different parts and different hemispheres. And what you have to understand about that is that our ancient ancestors, there's evidence that they were mushroom cults. You know, some of the most early examples of civilization idolized mushrooms. And because modern science has kind of proven now that there is significant changes in the brain that can occur from this, my perspective in alignment with Terence, and again, this does tie into UFOs, is that our most ancient proto-civilization or before civilization, ancestors, the shamans and the nomads, when they first started experiencing these higher states of consciousness through chance selections of psilocybin and things like this, they were encountering as they were scavenging and going across the grasslands, they were experiencing these novel states of consciousness that may have had a pretty significant role in our evolutionary acceleration, which again is still a big question mark in terms of how we made this very significant jump in the growth of the brain. What I think they might have been doing was initially having these extremely intense experiences, experiencing higher dimensional geometry, the things that for anyone who's had any experiences with psychedelics will know that one of the first onset visual phenomena is geometrics kind of coming out of the woodwork. Things start to look more mathematical, everything starts looking more precise. And then on a high dose, then you're in the different realm entirely, maybe even speaking with entities and having very novel insights. So I think what they were doing was initially, it was an oral tradition, word of mouth, passing this down. These are the methods to connect with the higher realms. Then when writing came about, they started creating these symbols. They started writing these symbols down. These symbols are now represented in our cathedrals, in our temples. All right, the cymatics, sacred geometry, and the flower of life, all these kind of things. These are ancient symbols that are encountered in psychoactive states. So it started to become a symbolic thing, writing down these sacred geometries, the Kabbalah, Kabbalism, these ancient principles. Once we got sophisticated enough, and I'm not saying this is true, this is just my interpretation, once we got sophisticated enough, we actually started to try and design these higher geometries that we were experiencing. That's where you get the pyramids, that's where you get the hypogeum, these places that contradict our understanding of how they were able to do this. They weren't meant to be this advanced, and yet precision engineering on a megalithic scale, subterranean, using limestone and piezoelectric materials like rose quartz granite, amplification materials, energetic materials. It's like they were using the raw materials of the earth as the circuits and the wires and the connecting devices, different type of technology to what we're doing. And I think designing these temples was actually meant to be a resonant, acoustic, harmonic sound temple to bring your state of consciousness up to these levels to actually experience what we might call higher dimensional reality. And that's where I think these UFOs actually come from or can traverse, experience with, and want to try and get us to understand at higher levels. So for me, my journey has been primarily centered on this whole idea of trying to understand this connection and entanglement between us and the UFO phenomena. And along the way, I've had some pretty interesting encounters with people who've changed the way that I think about things. And getting into kind of the more nuts and bolts element of this real quick, I don't have any doubt whatsoever that we have certain technologies that we would believe were extraterrestrial or alien, but in reality they're ours. I've spoken with aerospace engineers at very high levels, Lockheed and Raytheon, and they'll never go on record. I hate to be one of those people that's pulling a claim out, but they won't go on record. But I've heard enough, and I'm pretty confident that we're able to do these things. And it's a sad state of affairs, in my opinion, because I think it's an attack on human evolution. You go back to the 50s, the 60s, Even in modern physics, the consensus was the next thing is going to be anti-gravity, electrogravitics, propellantless, fuel-less propulsion. This is the future. This was mainstream. This was just expected. And then it stopped. 60s, 70s, just an iron curtain of secrecy falls down over this. Labs get raided, scientists disappear. I think that the national security state, in all of its arrogance, has held back vital evolutionary check marks of humanity. We weren't supposed to use fossil fuels for this amount of time. It was meant to be a transition point. You go from this to this. But they've held it back, and what do we see? We see resource wars and scarcity and poverty and hunger and desperation. Because of what? National security concerns? You know, the worry that North Korea or China or Russia is going to get hold of this stuff? I don't know. You tell me if you feel like that's a justification. I'm not sure, because it's a difficult one. You know, I wouldn't want to be one of these 5-star generals sitting there going, what do we do about this? Because, you know, if it gets out to our enemies, this could be really problematic. But at the same time, we need this. Our planet is starting to collapse. It's starting to fall apart. And our culture, our people, our society is starting to fall apart in many ways. And I do think that's a symptom. I think that's a consequence of being held back evolutionarily by some, you know, pretty bad folks. Again, that's why I have issues, I think, with kind of the narrative that's being put out through the US government, that there's no possible way that this could be human technology, and you know, there's absolutely nothing in our arsenal that can compete with this. I don't trust that, and I would invite you to at least be, you know, cautious and skeptical, at least. One of the issues I've encountered in the UFO subject is that people don't like it if you take away that belief, right? And good research is about finding the things that don't always align with your beliefs, and it's important that we stay objective. You know, we all want to see a disclosure happen. We all want to see real evidence come out, but blindly putting faith in like the national security architecture to deliver that to us, I'm not sure. I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. So for me, it always leads back to a more spiritual sense. I don't really know what I mean by a spiritual sense other than it's transcendental to our normal reality. It's something that's speaking to a much larger reality than we're accustomed to. I always thought that the world was more magical, you know. As I got older, it gets a bit grayer, doesn't it? You know, you're a child and it's just you're in your own imagination. As you get older and life gets a bit more stressful and things start piling on, it takes a bit of the magic out. But that's what really woke me up, was like, oh my gosh, there is so much more than we have in this little, you know, kind of societal framework we've developed as a planet. And there is things that are far beyond this that I think could inspire us to change. And it inspired me. That's the truth of it, is that it took me from being just some guy, just, you know, doing some job, to someone who was completely passionate and inspired and had a desire to try and communicate this with people. And I'm not alone. So many people have this this innate desire once they have an experience, so they have to share this knowledge. They have to share their experience. And for whatever reason, I guess I decided that I was going to put it up on YouTube, and it's become, you know, something that I now talk about. And hopefully I'm not talking too much in circles and you're actually enjoying this talk. But, you know, it's for me, it's just a profound realization that reality's a lot bigger. It's a lot more magical. It's a lot more profound. And these states of experience, you don't have to be on, you know, psychedelics. You don't have to be in a deep meditation. This can happen in front of your face. Again, I'm not a practitioner. It was so basic, just breathing in for, you know, that was it. And that's why I felt like I'd found this weird secret. I found, you know, like, why is it so easy to do this? But it kind of goes back to that intention thing. All right, this intention and belief, and, you know, dare I say faith. If you're not there, it doesn't turn up. There were so many times when I was, you know, actually in the process of doing this stuff, like out in my garden doing these, you know, contact attempts, when nothing turned up. It wasn't like every single time there was success. No, there's plenty of nights where just nothing turned up because I wasn't actually in the right state. And a lot of people would say to me, like, oh, you need to film it. So I'd be there, like, yeah, seriously, trying to help them out, like literally like, okay, there we go. Oh God, I hope they turn up. And immediately you're not in the headspace that you need to be. This needs to be gone. You need to just be absolutely in that moment, crystal, calm, clear, concise, with clarity of what you want to be doing. You can't do that if you're doing this. So it's an awkward one, because obviously a lot of people just be like, oh, that's such a cop-out. So easy to say, oh, you can't get the evidence because it doesn't help with your mindset. It's true. It doesn't. It doesn't help. So it's a subtle interplay. It lives on the fringes of reality. It's there if you take a step towards it. But it doesn't seem to step towards you that much unless you're actually a willing participant yourself. Now, I don't know what's going on with like abduction phenomena and things like this. I really don't. And like I said, I had those marks. Maybe there is something there. Maybe I am being a little naive. And perhaps there is something to be concerned about. Again, I'm not here to try and tell you, oh, it's just all beautiful. Because reality is hard. We're in the trenches of the human experience, man. It's visceral. It's real. We all go through pain. We all go through struggle and darkness. But that's also a necessary component, right? There's so many times in my life where I've sat there and just been like, well, this is hopeless. It's just not going to improve. It's clearly like this is just, give up. And then upon reflection, you realize, oh, God, that led to this. This led to that. So you have to try and kind of bless both sides of that yin and yang. It's literally the engine that creates the reality. We're all participating in that mosaic, weaving that fabric together. And I think another realization that I kind of got from this, at least just in terms of love being such an important force, because it was really not even the times where I was like, sending out complex ideas of like, this is what I think is going on. No, actually the coolest times and the quickest moments were when I was just looking up at the sky and being like, man, I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful to be alive, and, thank you for showing me what you've shown me. Bam, flash. It's like a little kind of like, yeah, dude, you're thinking the right way. That's the way to think. And I think that's what it is. It's encouraging us to try and think in a little bit more expanded, a little bit more loving, a little bit more powerful. Because we are powerful entities, in my opinion. We've been kind of pushed down and fooled into believing that we're just kind of 9-to-5 worker bees. I think we're actually immortal, infinite aspects of the universe experiencing itself through avatars. Is that my time to leave now? It's all good, don't worry. I think that love is such a fundamental, powerful thing. It's like you think about the animalistic nature of survival of the fittest and fight and flight. Or why would a stranger run into a burning building to save another stranger's baby? That makes no evolutionary sense in terms of like survival of the fittest, right? That's not your offspring, but it happens. So love transcends logic. And logic is the material realm. It's the illusion. It's Maya, rationalism and logic. We are floating on a ball in potentially infinite space. There's nothing rational about our situation whatsoever. It's an incredibly strange position to be in, and it's quite alarming. I'm sure a lot of you feel this way. Quite alarming that most people just don't think about that. Just don't think, oh God, like I am really on a little ball in the middle of infinite unknown. That's existential. I think in the background, perhaps there's a bit of a subconscious fear of addressing that. We're all just kind of like, yep, it's an intense situation, but can I just click, go to my job and watch my TV shows? I don't want to think about that. I don't have a choice. My brain just works in that way. I'm like always in the clouds, always thinking about, these types of things, and having those experiences was just fuel on that fire. So I have to make a conscious effort to anchor myself back down into reality, because I'm so kind of off in the philosophy of what reality might be. And that's another thing as well, is with these subjects, you do have to take time away from it. You do. You have to connect with life and connect with reality and kind of, be around people and leave the computer alone. And because it's good and it's important to discuss these things, but it's not necessarily meant to just ignore the normal world. We're still here to have an experience. We're still here to navigate through an experience. It might be a component of your learning process. It doesn't mean it's going to be the component for everyone. It's a bit like those books at the beginning, these conversation with God books that I wrote, that I read. What was really weird about that was that I read these books and then had this journey of research, then had the contact experiences, and then this guy puts out another book, and it's all about how there are other reality, other dimensions, and that these things are interacting with our planet. And it was just a very strange kind of arc, because he wasn't discussing that stuff in the other books. But then I have my orb experiences, and suddenly the guy that was inspiring me is talking about things that correlate with what I've just experienced. Now, that's just synchronicity. This is what seems to be at play when you're dealing with this phenomena, synchronicity. Like I said, I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Neil Donald Walsh. I'd recommend you check it out. Like I said, I'm not here to hold up those things as like a Bible, but very interesting. I was very doubtful of like the channeling aspect of things. Like I'm not closed off to it because I'm very open in terms of clairvoyance and these gifts, but let's be honest, there's a lot of snake oil out there as well. There's a lot of people who just make this stuff up, so you have to be super careful. I think he was really onto something, so I'd recommend them to anyone who's curious. But yeah, this subject is difficult. It can be traumatic. It can be extremely inspiring. And I think, again, this leads to some form of evolutionary driver. It's something that's trying to encourage us to think a little bigger and to think outside of the box. It's a paradigm breaker, It's something that challenges conventions. It challenges our scientific status quo. It challenges our abilities and our understandings of the laws of physics. So it's in every way, it's breaking down the current infrastructure. It's saying it's not sufficient. Clearly, it needs to change because these things exist and they're defying our model. So it has to change. So it is a driver. Even if it's not a driver inherently, it's still a driver by consequence because it's inspiring people to try and pursue novel experiences, which I think the universe is all about. It's a big novel machine. It's generating more novelty. That's something, again, that Terence said. You think about how the universe potentially, we don't really have a good idea of how it started. The Big Bang has almost been completely thrown out now by the James Webb Space Telescope, I believe, because they found that there was actually highly evolved galaxies close to what we considered to be the beginning of time. That makes no sense, so that was contradicted, and it's put some spanners in the works. But you think about how reality's unfolded. Basic fundamental energies and hard radiation and soft radiation. It was chaos. And over time, over billions and billions of years, it's like unfolding. And it's becoming more being-like. It's becoming more like an actual entity. We are examples of that, right? At the beginning, it was just energy and vibration and chaos. And over time, it's connected the dots, it's weaving things together, it becomes solar systems, it becomes galaxies, it becomes planets. On those planets you get networks, we're a network, and we then go on and start developing the internet, AI. It's like a Russian doll of different networks of connectivity. And a lot of people would say that that's kind of approaching the singularity point, right? So like we're at a point now where our technologies are developing so rapidly that we're going to get to a place not too far away where everything connects with everything else. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it feels like things are speeding up so much right now in terms of innovation and also change and turbulence and things that are just happening in the world. It kind of feels like it's got a bit of a time limit to it. I can't see this model that we have for reality lasting for much longer. In fact, I already feel like I'm in the old world, looking at a new world coming in. And that's interpreted in all sorts of ways. The age of Aquarius, the apocalypse, right? The singularity. And again, it's just different perceptual lenses. It's like everyone has an intuition that something's on the horizon, there's something is building up. It can't last for long. But we're all seeing it through different lenses. We're all seeing it through our own respective lenses. So who knows if the UFO lens is the right lens? It might not be. Maybe all of them are the right lens, or none of them. But everyone seems to be having, even if you're a scientist and you're a PhD and you've got rational logic, you think the singularity might occur. You talk to a Christian, they might think it's the end times. You talk to a New Age Californian, it's the age of Aquarius, man. It's just different types of phenomena, but it's being experienced through different perceptual lenses. And so I kind of feel like the UFO element is a component of something much bigger. It's a component of what we might call the singularity. It's something from a time where everything connects. It's like a chariot of the gods. It's like a philosopher's stone, right? It's the do-all, anything tool. It can fly through dimensional time. It can transcend all the barriers that we have in our own little realm of perception. So it is like the ultimate tool. But then it's not just a scientific tool because it seems to be completely entangled with consciousness. So it's a spirit science, it's a spirit technology, it's an astral technology. Whatever that truly means, it's telling us that there is a much deeper level, a much deeper and much more profound level. I'm at 3:40. How long have I got? I can't actually remember when I meant to cut off. As long as I want? 4:05, okay. Well, in that case, maybe I could open it up to a few questions. I feel like I've rambled a bit, but I hope you've enjoyed it. If anyone does have a question or two, I'd love to answer them.
Check 1, 2.
We do have a microphone that's going to be passed around, so if anyone does have something they'd like to say, you're more than welcome to. It's genuinely quite tough doing this, Genuinely. I'm enjoying it, but, you start running around in your head like, oh gosh, am I repeating myself? So I hope that some things I think need to be repeated. You need to reinforce the idea that this is actually something that speaks to a deeper level of humanity, a deeper level of our own spirit. But please, go ahead.
Yeah, very, very interesting talk.
Well, thank you.
I agree with you on a lot of points. You said something about we're not supposed to have been on fossil fuels this long. And also my belief growing up in the 60s and 70s and being involved in promoting space and seeing how we didn't go from the moon to Mars.
Right.
If there is some kind of suppression of all this, how do you explain what's going on with Elon Musk? I mean, one man is doing multiple things, and they're moving us either into space and also sustainability.
Yeah, it was a great question. Elon is an interesting character. I mean, some people look at him as controlled opposition and not to be trusted, and I don't know. His position on UFOs, in my opinion, is quite suspicious. Because he's very dismissive, very, very dismissive. Oh, we've got 6,000 Starlinks, we would have seen it by now. So I'm kind of two opinions on that. One, he's read in NDAs. He can't talk about what he knows because, he's a private guy launching, satellites and sensors into space. It's no longer NASA. It's become a private thing. These guys could say something if they wanted to, right? They're not beholden to government. So he might be under an NDA. But there was one thing that I really I noticed with Elon, and it was when he was doing an interview with Lex Friedman, and they were talking about consciousness. And I was really surprised by what he said. He said, if you damage the brain, you damage consciousness. So therefore, it's generated by the brain. And I was like, that, from a guy that's very smart, is a really dumb thing to say. Because if I take a radio and I bash it in with a baseball bat, does that mean that the music can't be, is it generated by the radio? No, it's a signal that's being received by that radio. I've not damaged the signal, I've just damaged the receiver, the renderer, the translator, the amplifier of that signal, right? So I found that to be very dismissive. So I think that it's either that he's read in and that he can't talk, or actually he's just very dismissive of things that aren't in his wheelhouse. So, aliens and woo-woo consciousness, no, nonsense. He's not thinking about it enough, in my opinion. I think that's more likely, but I'm open to the idea that he might actually be, up to his eyeballs in secrecy and stamps of NDAs. But that was a great question, and I agree. Elon Musk and his, I actually interviewed the patient who had the Neuralink, the first Neuralink. So I'm going to try and whisper in his ear, if you've got a link with Elon Musk, tell him about this, about the aliens. I don't think he wants me talking to him anymore in the DMs, but yeah, great question, great question. Anyone else? No pressure. I'll just leave. Oh, I've got a couple of hands up. Just very quickly. Yes, dude.
What was the tribe, the Amazonian tribe?
well, to be fair, everyone heard that, but I can't remember. I actually can't remember. Sorry, man. But if you type in, and it is, I think it was M-A-K, like Makin, M-A-K-I-N, W-A-B-U, Makinwabu. If you type in like Amazonian tribe podcast, Makinwabu, gray alien, I'm sure it'll come up. No, it wasn't my channel. It was just some podcasters out there, but it was just fascinating. If you find the clip, trust me, it's really weird. Okay. Thanks, man. Cool. Anyone else? No? Oh, we got a hand up over there.
Hold on. Excuse me. So I've had experiences with orbs as well. Through your own research, I know you're not sure what they are, but have you gotten any clue from elsewhere what they might be?
Well, I'm open mainly to the idea that it's something of a higher topology, a higher dimensional framework. And again, I was very interested by the fact that Oak Shannon, this guy that's running special projects at Los Alamos, was like, our working group really feels that this is a higher dimensional presence that's just coming down into our lower dimensional plane. I don't know if anyone here's read the book Flatlands. He recommended it to me, and it's about a world that lives in two-dimensional space, so everything's flat in the flatlands, and it's about a sphere that comes into the 2D plane, and how is that perceived? And so I think it could be similar with this, is that you're perceiving a slice of what this is. I also think that because it seems to be responsive to higher energetic states like love and gratitude and these kind of like, higher threshold states of consciousness, I'm not against the idea that this is my ancestors or my spirit guides or whatever this might be, but I don't think it's alien in the sense of a planetary civilization checking us out and sending probes. And I don't think it's black technology from, the governments, because, well, it could be, but it would be terrifying if it was, because they are able to, pick up on your conscious thoughts and send orbs to come and check you out. No, I actually do think it's more likely to be something of a higher evolution of reality where these understandings about love and gratitude and powerful energies are much more present. And so when you're invoking these kind of energies with the intention of something kind of validating that experience, like show me that you feel this, show me that you have this understanding, then it turns up. That to me is a good signifier, unless it's a manipulating element that's trying to fool us otherwise. But like I said, it's led to me being here. So I'm actually very positive about it. So yeah, I don't have definitives, but for me, it leans more towards just higher expressions of reality that we're not living in but can experience, Well, I think, we got one over here. Let her get the microphone, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, do you feel like you still have some maybe communication going on with something beyond?
I think that whatever it was that decided to turn up, it inspired me, and I think that in of itself was a communication. It's a very novel form of communication. It's not a clear message. I wasn't told anything. I didn't get telepathic thoughts, but it was enough of a communication that there is something out there that it kept me going to this day. Do I feel like I'm in communication with those orbs now? Not necessarily, but I feel like I'm in constant communication with the universe. Like, not in any way that's special. I just think that the universe is conscious and we're conscious. So we're always in a constant state of communication with it. It's just whether or not you interpret those messages, right? It speaks through events and people and places. And if you're not going to look at that through the lens of these might actually be communications to me, something of a higher order that's giving you experiences that teach you. If you don't see it that way, then you won't see it as communication. But I kind of see this whole universe as a form of communication. You're welcome. We got one more here. Yeah?
Real quick. First of all, thanks. Great talk.
Thank you.
Really good. It's really
I was a bit nervous, I won't lie, but I've tried.
It's interesting to see how this is kind of like next generation contact talk
right
now, really going from the physical to what it means. And so I appreciate you going there. I think that's really where we need to go. I'm curious, though, speaking of the physical, though, the manifestation, the arm, the mark on the arm, what happened? What do you think that was? How do you think that happened, and where did it go?
So, good question. also, you're right, and some of the kind of older school guys who were very nuts and bolts, they've come into this, like Nick Cook, who wrote The Hunt for Zero Point and was always a very like nuts and bolts guy. He's now on the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies and writing about life after death. So it's like the deeper you go into this subject, it's an undeniable connection you start making with the immaterial and the more kind of astral. But sorry, what was the actual? The marks, the marks.
What do you think?
So, like, my kind of leaning on like one side or the other is like either I was taken and they did some form of, you know, experiment, but I actually lean more towards I was sitting on my bed asking for proof. I wanted proof. Now, they did turn up. That was proof. But that's real proof, right? Like having something on your skin. So even though it's a little bit uncomfortable and I'm not 100% sure what it means, it is almost like a literal stamp of validation. Like, there you go, we've been here. And I was like, oh my God, you know? So you know, like maybe it's that. That's what I would like to think. That's what I would like to think. But I'm open to other possibilities, just maybe not comfortable with them, you know? We've got another one over here. Do you want to just keep your hand up and she'll bring the microphone over to you? No, I think it's a rule, one of those rules, you know.
So you said that you, where the marks were, now you have a tattoo.
Yeah.
Is that
well,
intentional?
Well, yes, it is actually. I had, because I've gone through all sorts, as we all do as human beings, and I had a particular moment of tough times happening in my life, and I felt like I needed a bit of a change and a transformation, and I got this tattoo, which is a Greco-Egyptian version of the Staff of Hermes, because I really resonate with Hermes Trismegistus and like the hermetic concepts of reality. And funnily enough, and some of them are actually sitting in the crowd, I then got invited to Egypt. So I had an Egyptian tattoo put onto me as a kind of like, I need to like have something symbolic that shows that I'm moving on from, you know, the things that were causing problems for me at the time. This is a new time, a new chapter. And then I get invited to go out to Egypt with Timothy Hogan and some of the guys that are here. And that's when I met all of these people. So, you know, this tattoo is very symbolic to me in that sense. And, you know, I did want it to be in the same place as I had those marks because it feels like a pretty significant, you know, mark that was put on me, so I wanted something there in replacement of it. But those marks, they stayed on my arm for about a year without fading. That's just not normal. And like I said, they had this sheen to them, like a cauterized skin sheen. And there are images of that online. So, yeah, I don't know. It was an inspirational thing for sure. Yes. That's one of the guys I went to Egypt with. What's up, bro?
Excellent talk.
Thank
Jay.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
So my question is that in your sober state, you've been able to attract contact.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you find any overlap or differences in the DMT state versus?
I actually haven't ever done DMT.
Never?
No. It's
Okay,
like,
I just assumed because you had like Andrew on.
Yeah, no, I mean, the funny thing with me is I have like a bit of a problem with losing control, which I recognize, totally want to try and get over in my life. And it's funny, it draws an exact correlation to roller coasters. So I was a rock climbing instructor, mountain biking, I love extreme sports stuff, but I have to be in control. Okay, the brakes are on this thing. I'm not going to use them, but the brakes are there just in case I want to use them. You know, like, oh, I'm climbing up a rock. Well, I decide how high I want to climb. But the moment that on a roller coaster clicks in, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I can't get out. If I don't like this, I'm not going to be able to change it. And that's the exact same response I have with psychedelics. I recognize the importance of them. I've researched them. I have had some, like, you know, medium level experiences on things like psilocybin and stuff. But I want to do it. I want to do DMT. I'm just really scared of it. Maybe you can hold my hand while I do it. But in terms of like a correlation, I think there is. That's why I said that, you know, Graham Hancock, when he did ayahuasca, he started seeing alien greys and flying saucers. You know, what is that? So there is a crossover. And I think that this may talk to what these things are able to do. They're able to traverse through different dimensional topologies and ones that we don't even think are real, like the creative mind and, you know, the imagination and psychedelic experiences. So, yeah, thanks, bro. I am scared. I am very scared. Yes, sir.
Jay, I really enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
So if you're a little afraid of DMT, I'm a trainer at the Monroe Institute. Why don't you come join us at Monroe and do our kind of consciousness
I'll do that.
exploration?"
I appreciate that invitation, and I will take you up on that. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, we got another. Hey, Grant.
What's up, Jay?
Hey,
All right,
man.
so it's been years since you've been very vocal on the Wilson Davis notes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I forgot to talk about that.
It's
Sorry.
been about a year plus since you met with Oak Shannon.
Uh-huh.
Is your confidence in the authenticity of those documents continuing to increase, or are you wavering, or what is your current stance on them?
Good question, bro. I really find it interesting that Oak Shannon validated some stuff. So for people that don't know, the Admiral Wilson leaks involves Dr. Eric Davis, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, who had a secret meeting with an admiral called Admiral Thomas Wilson, where, to cut the long story short, because I don't have a whole lot of time, the admiral wanted to meet with Eric to tell him that he had been exposed to elements of the black budget architecture that were dealing with UFOs, that were dealing with retrievals of vehicles, that he was basically trying to find out what was going on and was told to shut up, or you're going to have, an early resignation and you're going to have some stars knocked off of your shoulder. So he was disgruntled, the admiral, according to this kind of, story that we have. And he wanted to speak to someone, and he had heard that Eric Davis was kind of the guy to speak to. I mean, he's the preeminent physicist who's got all the exotic ideas about propulsion and energy, and obviously the UFO subject. So he, according to this document, basically met up with the admiral, and the admiral kind of poured his heart out and told him, oh, well, this is what I found out, and this is what I've been shut out of, and it's real, there's a problem with it. What was interesting is, and for a long time, the Admiral Wilson documents were literally just words on paper, and I was actually really fortunate, just through a connection I had with a guy in the US Navy who was able to get in contact with Oak Shannon, because Oak Shannon's mentioned in these documents by the admiral. He says, oh, I wish Oak could be here. Big Oak Shannon fan. He validated you. I was on the phone with him for a few hours, and he said that you're okay, talking to Eric, saying that, Oak Shannon basically validated that you're a trustworthy guy to talk to. And he also said that, unfortunately, he can't be here because he's had a lot of health issues, and his wife, Linda, is taking his calls, but wish he could be here. So that's what's in the documents. And Oak Shannon, as much as he's part of this, because he was in the advanced theoretical physics group, these kind of groups within the Pentagon that were interested in the UFO stuff, but he's not vocal out there trying to sell a story or sell a book or do anything. He's a born-again Christian living a quiet life with his wife. I just happened to be able to get in touch with him, and he was a little unsure of what to do, but my friend offered to we'll come to Florida, we'll meet you, we'll buy you some dinner, and we'd just love to hear your story. And Oak Shannon, when we were sitting there, met him in a seaside restaurant in Florida, and it was so dramatic because we were sitting outside, this American flag was flying behind him, and this lightning storm was happening across the ocean as he's talking about this stuff. I was like, my God, I wish I had a 4K camera. This is perfect. But I didn't. But he validated these things that are in the papers. He was a little, unsure of what to say, and it kind of feels like Linda, his wife, is the gatekeeper here. She was the one who was like, go on, you can say that. Go on, say that to him. Tell him that. And he said that, yeah, the admiral phoned me up. Asked about Eric Davis, wanted to know if he was trustworthy, wanted to know if I could speak to him about things that were sensitive. And Oak Shannon, who had ran in the same circles and had worked with Eric, validated him, gave him the thumbs up. And this was confirmed to me by Oak Shannon himself. He also said he had had a major heart attack, was on the operating table, and Linda was answering his calls. Now, it's funny because the admiral has been questioned by journalists. Some people have approached him, Admiral Wilson. Now, he says, Oak who? Oak? Oh, I don't know an Oak. And it was funny because when we were at this dinner, I said, well, what do you think of the admiral saying that that he doesn't really know you? And he just went like, oh, yeah, no, I know him. He knows him well. And so the Admiral Wilson leaks are a really interesting thing. They've been put into the congressional record. Gary Nolan was the one that actually recommended that Senator Mike Gallagher, put these into the congressional record, which is a pretty incredible thing in of itself, that we have in the congressional record a series of documents about reverse engineering programs, interdimensional capabilities, and an admiral that was denied access to all of this stuff. So it's really interesting that happened. Where I sit on the authenticity, I still lean towards them being legit, mainly because of the Oak Shannon validation. because it's a physical person outside of just words on paper. But I've had a lot of debates on this stuff with people like John Greenwald and others who disagree and think that it's actually just kind of like a script that's been propped up as a way of pushing forward disclosure and pushing forward a narrative. And frankly, I'm also not against that idea. I try and be really careful with like not concreting myself into a belief, because you are dealing with the intelligence community, and these people are not always straightforward. So it's a gray area, I think, but I still lean towards legitimacy, my bro. Thank you for the question. 5 minutes, so if anyone's got kind of like a last question I could answer, yes?
Hi, yeah, so I noticed that, or I recall that like in the description of the CE5 event, you mentioned that the orbs seem to not be generating any light of their own. We had a similar CE5 experience with orbs, and they also seemed to have a weird sheen, or they looked as if they were like, we thought they were kind of projected like a video game screen thing. Anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting detail that you mentioned, that they don't seem to have a texture that, or a light refraction pattern that looks like you'd expect.
I mean, it defies all kind of like logical conventions of what light does, right? So it's just another indicator that this is something really novel, and that's also why I didn't fully dismiss the idea of it being like a psychic projection, a tulpa, like the Buddhists would say, because, well, if it's almost being coaxed from your imagination, then it doesn't technically exist, and the light would act differently. But honestly, that's a mystery, and it's fascinating. So yeah, it's cool that you had a similar experience, and people have had experiences all over the world with this kind of stuff. Orbs especially, like there seems to be a lot of categories of orbs. You know, blue orbs, yellow orbs, orange orbs, red, white. So many, I don't know if it's the same phenomena. I've only ever seen the orange ones, but yeah, no, it's interesting that there's clearly exotic light physics at play there. All right, I think that's about it, guys. Just want to say thank you. I hope I've been entertaining and informative. First time doing this, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And if you want to chat to me, I'm going to be out there and relaxing. You know, I'm perfectly happy to come and talk to you guys. So thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of the conference.